Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So last week I put up a poll on Discord and YouTube because we just unlocked the community tab since we hit 1,000. So thank you everyone. And you guys voted on seeing some widgets. So basically some UI in VR and how we can set that up. There's a couple of ways to do this, but I thought I'd do the longer one, which is more accurate and gives us more control. And it also gives the player or your user more input, so more control over it. So I'm right-handed, so this is the hand that I've chose to have my widget on. But let's say you've got a user or you've got a game and you want to switch hands. So normally when setting up widget interactions, most videos show you how to apply it directly to the hands, and this causes two inputs. So basically you've got two widget interactions on both hands and you can interact with both things at the same time. I don't really like that, so I'm going to show an easier way of doing it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can set up widget interactions on one hand, but also the ability to switch between. So as you can see here, I'm right-handed, so I've got it set to right by default. But if I go to options in my little quick menu that I've got set up, I can actually choose which hand I want to use. So if I say left, it's actually now moved to my left hand, and I can't interact with anything using my right controller. Only my left. So if I go back to right and I can do the same, I can use my right hand, but I can't interact with it with the left. Hopefully if you've played around with VR and widget interactions, you know what I'm on about, and this should be a good way of doing it. So let's just hit quit and we'll go back into the project. So I'm not actually going to use this project, but what we're going to do is we're going to create a basic blueprint with our widget. And then we're going to create our widget interaction directly in our player controller. So I jump over to a blank project. What I'll do is at the end of the project, I'll package this up and I'll put it on the Patreon. So if you do want to grab this project and check it out and have a look at how it works, you'll be able to do that there, or simply just migrate the character over and using your own project. So I'm going to cover a couple of things. I'm going to explain it as we go. When we normally make widget interactions, it's common that people go into the blueprint motion controller and add a component, so widget interaction, which is what we're going to use, and they normally add it to their hand mesh. So if I add it to my hand mesh and with the interaction selected, I show debug and hit compile and play in editor, you'll see that we actually have the widget interaction on both hands. This is really not good at all because you don't want to be able to like shoot both hands. I know it's been a little while to get into the video, but just trying to make a little bit of sense of what not to do, so you know why we're doing it the way we are essentially. So I'm going to delete this so it's back to normal, and we're just going to use the motion controller pawn. So when you open this up, you see by default it's got all our inputs and our events. So it just makes sense to keep everything in the exact same place. That way, if you've got a multiplayer game, let's say, all you've got to do is copy your motion controller and everything's still going to work exactly the same way. You don't need to do any references or anything like that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in here is just add one widget component. So we're going to go add component, widget interaction, and you can see that this basically isn't a child of anything at this point. It's just free reign, it's floating there on its own. If we start up, it'll actually be nowhere, it'll just be at 0, 0, 0 world space. So what we need to do is set the position for this widget to the hand. And all we're going to do is drag off, so we've got the widget. And then from here, we need to make a custom event. So we're going to right click, type in custom event. Basically this is going to run how often it's updated. So the world location, we're going to use event tick to do this. So I'm just going to call this widget interaction, or widget. Actually, let's call it interaction location. Actually, never mind. Widget interaction is going to be way better. Widget interaction location. It's a bit long. But now what we do is scroll down and find our event tick. We're going to hit add pin and we're going to drag off there and do widget interaction location. And you see it's under call function widget interaction location. Basically, every time this node fires, it's going to fire our event. It's just an easy way of keeping it organized and pretty much clean. So what we need to do now is update the position of our widget interaction to our hand, and we're going to do that by getting our left and right controllers. So we're going to drag out our left and right controller just from our variables menu on the left. We're going to do some stuff. Okay, so from our widget interaction, we're going to drag out, we're going to set world location and rotation. That'll give us this. And then we're going to take our left controller, we're going to drag off, and we're going to go get world location. And from here, we actually want to get our world location from our motion controller. We're going to use that to decide whereabouts in the world it's actually located. And we're going to plug that into our new location. So let's do that. And then we're going to drag off motion controller again. And we're going to do get world rotation. We're going to hit compile, and then we're going to plug that into our widget interaction location. And now, if I hit play, actually, I need to go into my widget interaction and make sure show debug is on. Hit compile and play. And now we set this up to our left hand. So if we jump in, you see our widget interaction is basically only on one hand. And since we're here, we might as well set this up to work with our right. So we're going to do basically copy everything that we've got here. Just do Control C and Control V. And we're going to plug our right controller into our motion controller. So now I think this will break because I want it to. It should only pick one hand, I think. So yeah, it can't really decide, so it just went to the right hand. And what we're going to do now is actually we're going to use a switch. So super easy. We've got the position. We're going to drag off our event. We're going to do switch on int. It was already there and I went past it. And we're going to set up two outputs or two pins. And default, I'll be right-handed, so I'm going to put it to my right. And for 0, I want it to be my left hand and 1 to be right hand. It's easy to just set these up because we're going to use a value to switch between them, essentially. So if I bring this over, now from the selection, we're going to promote a variable, and we're going to call this use left/right hand, and hit compile. So we got it down here, and you can see we can actually change the value now. So 0 is going to be left hand, and right is going to be 1. 1 is going to be right hand. So basically when it starts, it will be 1. When we set it back, it'll be 0, and then vice versa. You'll be able to switch between. So with it set to 0, if I hit compile, we should be on our left hand or left hand controller, which it is. And now if I change it to 1, hit compile, save, hit play, we now have it on our right controller. So that's how we can set up the switching, and now we need to make it interact. Before we set up the interaction, actually what we can do is we can select our content here. We're going to use the left controller later on, the widget interaction, so let's just collapse these to, let's just make it a function. And we'll call this, let's call this widget interaction location. Let's just call it interaction location. So interaction location. And what we can do is actually delete this now. Use Control C, Control V, plug them back in. We might as well keep it tidy if we're doing this. So that's one way to do it. And we're going to rename self2 to widget interaction. And then we'll call self3 hand. Excellent. So now we've got this updated, and it's basically the exact same thing. We've just cut down our code so it's a little bit more cleaner. And then if you do want to go in, you can actually double click and it'll open these up as the function, which you can actually see on the left as well. So we're going to compile and save. And before we actually set up our key presses, essentially, we need to just make a really quick widget interaction. So I'm going to make a new folder. Let's call it widgets. And in here, we're going to right click and we're going to create a blueprint class. BP_UMG for Unreal Motion Graphics menu. or main menu, let's say. And we're going to drag this into the scene. And I'm doing this because in here, we're actually going to add our widget. If you're also on the quest, I forgot to mention this, that you need to, with your widget, you actually need to set it to blend mode transparent, or it won't appear in the build. But the thing is, now we've got a widget, we don't actually have anything to view. So I'm going to be quite rough with this because this video is already getting on in length. So we're just going to right click, user interface. I'm going to create widget blueprint. Let's call it WB with a prefix underscore. Let's just call it button. In the next video, we'll look at making some of these a bit more complicated and how we can switch between different views. But for now, with this open, we're just going to grab a button. We're going to bring it into the center of the screen. And on the right, it says anchors. We're actually going to set this to center. At least it's roughly center. And hit compile. So if I jump over to our blueprint, which contains our widget, on the bottom right, or on the right hand side under user interface, it says widget class. This is where we assign our user interface that we just created. So mine's called widget blueprint button. So if we select that, you'll see it comes in absolutely huge. What I like to do is enable draw to desired size, so it actually fits the aspect ratio. And if I hit compile and save and we jump into our game, you'll see it's facing the wrong way. So I'm going to rotate it around. And it's absolutely huge. Normally I bring this up a little bit and then I drop the size of the actual blueprint to something more reasonable, which is actually quite nice. So 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. And then in our button, we're going to go to graph. We've got our button. We're going to go on pressed. We're going to print string. And then we're going to call it pressed. So now once we get our interaction working, when we actually press the button, it should tell us in the corner that we've actually pressed it. Don't worry about the UMG widgets. This is more of a debug tool at this stage, just so we can keep on it and we can work out what we've got. So I'm going to comment our code that we've got so far. I'm going to call it set widget interaction to hand location. Excellent. And now we can set it up so we can actually use it. So if we hit compile, we're going to go to edit, project settings, and here we need to actually make our input. So if you scroll down under engine, it's got an input tab, and we're actually going to create an action mapping. Basically, this is an on-off value. So once button's pressed, it's on. If it's off, it's not, essentially. Whereas axis mappings are a value of 0 to 1, so it goes between them, basically like thumbsticks and stuff like that. So we don't get too far ahead, because this has already been going for quite a while. We're going to do action mappings. We're going to hit plus. Going to select that and go left trigger. Actually, we'll call it trigger left. We'll keep with how it's laid out. Trigger left, and we'll hit plus. We'll call this trigger right. And now what we need to do is actually find our key. So at the minute, we haven't got any keys assigned to it, so we're going to go to the drop down. Because I'm using my Oculus Quest, which uses the Oculus Touch controllers, I'm going to use them. But if you're using another device, such as the HTC Survive, you just set that up for the button that you want. It's pretty easy. So we're going to go to Oculus Touch, touch left trigger, because that's the one that we're on. And then we're going to go to Oculus Touch again, and we're going to select our right trigger. And you can see that's Oculus Touch R for right trigger. And that's basically it for input. We just need to remember our names. So we've got trigger left and trigger right. So you see if we go to if we right click, so we can call our actions, we go event, trigger left, and then we're going to do it again for the event trigger right. So event trigger right. And now we can actually use these to fire our interactor. So we're going to drag off pressed, and we're going to search for press pointer key, so widget. And you see it automatically grabs our widget interaction from our components list, which is exactly what we're after. And in here, we just need to set our key to be left mouse button. Basically, it's converting our trigger to a left click so UIs can pick it up. It's exactly what we need. So we're going to do that, and we're going to copy. Actually, we'll just do the released. So we're going to right click and go release pointer key, and we're going to do the exact same thing. So, oh, that was right, left mouse button, and we're going to drag this down because we can actually use the same one for both. So I'm going to press into pointer key and released. So now both of them actually work. So if I go to compile, save, and hit play, you should be able to jump in, and if I point at our button, you can see in the top left it says pressed. The issue with this is I can actually press my left trigger and it also presses the widget, which is not what we want. So this is where we can split this up, and it's basically where we take advantage of our integer that we created earlier. We're going to drag this in, we're going to do get, and then what we need to do is an equal, so just double equal signs, we're going to equal integer. So basically if it's 0, we want it to be our left hand, and if it's not, so I1, it'll be our right hand. And we're going to do this with a branch, so I'm just going to hold B, and I'm going to bring in 2 branches for our pressed and released. And if I bring them in and hit true for the top and then true for the bottom, and we're going to do the exact same thing for our right trigger. Make sure I've got these in the right way. Yep, top one true, bottom one. Excellent, so it should look like this. Now all we've got to do is actually use our left right hand bool and plug these 2 into the top. And we're actually going to drag off, and we're going to do not boolean. It's basically if it's the other version, and we're going to do not. So now if I hit compile and save, hit play, you can see we can press with the right controller, but if I press the left trigger, nothing actually happens, which is really good. And if we set this to 0, I'm going to hit compile and save, and we hit play, you'll see that it does the exact same thing and works exactly how we want it. So I'm going to tidy this up, and I'm going to do something else which I'm going to show you. So let's say you want the player to actually switch widgets based on the right trigger or left trigger. So you don't want them both at the same time, but you do want it to be, I think Beat Saber is a good example, where if you press right trigger, it'll actually allow you to do that, but if you then press left, it'll switch over. It's super easy. All you got to do is use left trigger, do set, and bring this into our widgets. And then if we do Control C, Control V, so it's on the bottom, and set this to 1, and hit compile, what should happen, it starts with the left because I left it on 1, but I can click, it still works. But now if I press right trigger, it actually switches over and does the exact same thing. And it basically allows us to switch between which hand we're using it at a time, essentially. So rather than having them both working, it just works a little bit easier. Let's tidy this up a little bit. Can actually use that one widget for both. And I'm not going to use the left or right hand, so I'm going to actually remove this, and I'm going to set our hand back to 1, I think it was. Default 1, right-handed. Yep. So let's comment it. So we'll do a comment. Which hand can activate widget? So that's pretty much it for setting up our widget interaction. So if you're on the quest, I want you to hang on for a minute, but if not, that's pretty much it for this video. What I'm going to do is, in part 2, I'll show you how we can set up the little pointer so we know where we're actually pointing, because once you build a project, you can't actually use the show debug tool in build view. So we're going to look at how we can create a little pointer that we can see in the world and go from there. But if you're on the quest, you'll find that if you use show debug and you build it, it'll be on both lenses. It's difficult to explain. I'm going to build a project and we'll jump back in. Okay, so jumping over to the quest, I've built the project, and you can see we've got our widget UI, got our button, it's working still, but we've got this weird line, which is our visual debugger. For some reason it breaks on the quest. So on the screen you can see it's away from the hand, but in the quest, which you can't see, is there's a line actually coming from it, which is the main one, which we're using, and then the one over here. In part 2, what we'll do is we'll look at removing this and just creating a visual representation of the endpoint, so we can still see where we're pointing at and interacting with. So I hope you really enjoyed this video, and I hope it was really useful. If you did like it, don't forget to leave a like as normal, and maybe subscribe if you're new. If you want to get access to the files that I've used for this, or this entire project, what I'll do is I'll put it on Patreon to be able to download. We also have a Discord, which is linked down in the description below. It'd be awesome if you want to head over there. It's a great way to keep up with content that I'm working on and polls, and just have a chat with other devs. So until next time, stay safe and I'll see you then. Bye.